live on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. It's time for Middays with Q. Now to your host, Rich Quinones.
Good afternoon, everyone. 12 o'clock straight up on the East Coast. It is indeed a Tuesday edition of Middays with Q, coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game studios, powered by Broad Street South, and of course, Eye on TV. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. Angel Martinez behind the glass, producing the show, keeping us on the air. 60 plus minutes to play with. As always, chime in 727-858-6650, 727-858-6650. Good stuff from Pete Sheppard earlier this morning. A little potpourri, and that's kind of where we're going with the short week. Obviously, with the holiday right around the corner, 4th of July, then we start to dive into training camp in the NFL. We finally put a bow and wrapped up everything going on with the NBA finals, Stanley Cup finals. We saw some monster moves yesterday in the NBA. I'll kind of circle back as well. Good stuff from Jonathan Marshall as well on Monday's show. And as always, you guys can check out some of the content on our YouTube channels, respectively, Broad Street South, as well as Rich Q on Q, and on demand on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. So with that being said, as I mentioned, a little potpourri, a little mixed bag today. We'll talk about the NBA and some of the free agent moves, dive into a little NFL, some baseball. How about last night, right? If you are a soccer fan and you're watching the United States, and I mean, listen, I'm as passionate as a soccer fan as anyone. Grew up playing the sport for an extended amount of years, and you watch what transpired, losing 1-0 against Uruguay, and now you're hosting the Copa, right? You've got a stacked roster, you've got a manageable group, and you'll still lose. And at that moment, we always talk about changes in different sports, respectively, whether it's NFL, NHL, baseball, NBA, it doesn't matter. If you're not getting the job done, you're not getting the job done. And I think last night, again, there's more reasons why this team is just not as strong as we've seen. It's one of the reasons why, when you get into the World Cup too, USA maybe gives you a moment and then they get bounced. I mean, they're going backwards. And I think right now you definitely have to consider making a head coaching change. I think they should have done this after they got bounced in the World Cup, just having a conversation with my buddy in that regards. And I think when you hosting the event, when you've got a manageable group and you still come up lame, that kind of tells you everything you need to know, and you're not making progress. And I think that's the one tell, right? You're not making progress. So you add a couple additions, you add a couple forwards, arguably one of the best player in the tournament that you throw in there. Balogun, you've got, what about what transpired with Reina a couple years ago? So you see that gap, right? I mean, you thought it was narrowing, and then all of a sudden, boom, you put up the type of effort last night. And I get it. Hindsight's 2020 with everything. It doesn't matter the sport, but kind of a bad showing, a disappointing showing. And certainly when you look at the roster, you look at the makeup, then you also have to look at what's going on with the head coach. And that's just the bottom line. And I think at this moment, Berhalter, it's got to be a change right now. But as I mentioned, USA falls 1-0. And it's tough, man, especially if you're betting on soccer too. Sometimes you got to get these underdogs, which is always an interesting little play. So little soccer to start you off on this Tuesday, and kind of piggyback and bleed over from the conversation yesterday in the NBA. Funny, we have Jonathan Marshall on, and he covers the Celtics for WMUR. And this probably came down after we were off the air. Jason Tatum, a 5-year, $314 million deal with the Boston Celtics. And Tatum, if you remember a couple of years ago, the first thing out of his mouth was, 4, 5, 6 championships by the time he was 23, 24, 25. And we were always joking, hey, you got some ground to make up. That contract, in essence, is the largest contract in NBA history. And you've got a player option, you got a trade kicker. And finally, Tatum was able to get over the hump. 26 years of age, finally leading the Celtics in the NBA championship. winning it all. Obviously, their 18th banner. It was a 5-game, I think, kind of a snooze fest of a series over the Dallas Mavericks. They averaged 22-7 and 7 assists as well. So nearly a triple double. And what's interesting is that years ago, it was always the talk, is it Ben Simmons or Jason Tatum? We used to throw out superlatives, and the Pete Sheppard crowd that always carries over into Martinez and Company and Middays with Q, and we greatly appreciate it. You guys are Boston fans, so you can appreciate this, right? It was always, who's the transcendent player? Who's more of the transcendent player? Is it Ben Simmons, who is basically being bounced around the league? Is it Jason Tatum? When are they going to take that next step? And a lot of times you're seeing some of these young players, they want to put it all on their broad shoulders. Some players wilt, some players crumble under the spotlight. Some players don't know how to handle the spotlight. And I think the knock when you attach Tatum to Brown, this Celtics team can never get over the hump. When we started the season, I literally mentioned it on BYP. We talked about it on Middays with Q, my other pods as well, and other radio spots. Anything less than getting to the NBA Finals and winning it would have been a catastrophic loss for the Boston Celtics. I mean, it just would have been a discouraging, disheartening, just colossal failure by the Boston Celtics. And you attach the young players to the logo, do you not? Because we're going to do it in Philadelphia. We're going to attach these players, whether it's going to be Embiid, George, veteran guys, if you will, and then a young kid in Maxey to the Sixers. They're going to take them as far as they can go. And that's kind of been the same sentiment in Boston and really the NBA over the last 15, 20 plus years. But now you've got that Batman, the Robin, and Jaylen Brown. You add in KP Porzingis. They gave the kid White, congrats to him, a nice fat contract, well-earned and deserved. You know, it doesn't matter, D1, D2, does not matter. If you get a chance to play, and you make the best of your opportunity and the most of your opportunity. But it's like, where's all this money coming from, right? I mean, it's crazy. So I pulled it up. The Celtics agreed to an extension with White. So now Boston has every member of its starting lineup under contract through at least 2025, 2026. So you've got Tatum, you've got Brown, you've got White, you've got Drew Holiday, and you got KP, you got Kristaps Porzingis. That totals $198.5 million. And people were saying, where's all this money coming from? Oh my God, what are we doing? This, that, the other thing. If you look at the deal values right now, the top two in the NBA belong to who? Tatum and Brown. 314 and 285 respectively. Joker comes in at 276. And let's not forget about the horrible deal that the Suns got in bed with Bradley Beal. God bless him. $251 million. Now, does it change the landscape of the Eastern Conference after what transpired yesterday with the Philadelphia 76ers? I still maintain that there are windows of opportunity. There are small windows in sports where you have to take advantage of signings, free agent dealings. You have to take advantage of players going down. If you're going against your opposition, you have to really take advantage of the situation when it presents itself. I cannot sit here on the 2nd of July, 2024 with the utmost confidence and say the Sixers are now the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. And it's not a bias towards the Knicks, my Knicks. It's not a disdain for all things Philly and the Philadelphia 76ers. It's not a disdain for the Boston Celtics. It's not being too giddy of a fan for the New York Knicks. Knicks got work to do. Point being is I still maintain the Boston Celtics are the best team in the Eastern Conference, but that leads me into this, 727-858-6650. That window, does it now reopen up for the Philadelphia 76ers? Because if we've learned anything over the years in the NBA, if you're that 6th, 7th, 8th seed, we always talk about purgatory, right? Man, it's tough to make a run as a 6, 7, or 8 seed. You don't want that's telling the league, your fan base, and the sports world and NBA hoopers alike, you're a good team. You're not going to get a game-changing draft pick. You're not going to get a game franchise-changing player at 6, 7, or 8. And maybe you win a round. You're not bad, but you're not really good. And that's why you've got to be at least a top 2, right? And we know Giannis is going to come back. We know that window's closing with Milwaukee, even though they got their opportunity. They won their championship a couple years ago, and they still fired the head coach. Go figure. We know Cleveland's a young team on the rise. We know Orlando's a young team on the rise. We know Indiana is a good, gritty team on the rise with some really nice players. We know the Knicks are a gritty team. They're trying to make some moves. And then you got the Sixers, and I think we put all our eggs in one basket, especially if you're a Sixers fan, from going back years ago to Sam Hinkie and the process, because that's all you heard. And then when they would fail after year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go through coach after coach or GM after GM, I mean, you go through the Hinkies, the Brands, the Colangelos, I mean, the burner accounts, everything. You go through the Browns, the Doc Rivers. I mean, after a while, you got to say to yourself, this just is not working. And this will now be that conversation in the offseason, meaning no more excuses. No more excuses if you are the Philadelphia 76ers. You finally had that third fiddle. You want to even say the second fiddle to Embiid, even though we know Maxi's a hell of a player. There can be no more excuses. You can't sit there and win 50-something odd games and get bounced in the first round because the head coach is going to lose his job. The GM might lose his job. You can't get back to the playoffs and get bounced in the second round. You can't get to the Eastern Conference Finals and get back. You have to make a run to the NBA Finals. And I know because it's so fresh, 24, 48 hours. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. I'm seeing it on social. They've got the top talent. They got the 3 best players on the floor at the same time. They should be the clear-cut favorite. We talked about their betting odds, and now they've gone down a little bit. You're starting to see the money on the Philadelphia 76ers because we are a prisoner of the moment in sports. Had this conversation with Lloyd Vance, who does a great job hosting Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. We did our BYP podcast, Back Your Play, and we were talking about the NFC North. And I'll get into a little football. But point being is, we always look at these teams that win the offseason, right? We did this a couple years ago. Cleveland Browns won the offseason, right? Here we go. Cleveland, they had the big win against Pittsburgh. Baker Mayfield, flashing that money sign. Here we go. Took a step back, right? The Giants overachieved, beat Minnesota, went on the road. Here you go. Daniel Jones, pay him. Took a step back. We always get giddy. Houston Texans surprised a lot of people. They're going to take a step back. I think we get too caught up in what transpires during the offseason. And I've always maintained this. Show me on a Sunday. Show me on a Sunday in the NFL. Put it together. Talk to me in September. NBA is a long season. Sixers going to struggle here and there. Every team hits a little bump in the road in the NBA season because it's a grind. It's a long season. It's a war of attrition. But if this team gets off to a slow start, once again, you're going to have the naysayers. If Paul George gets banged up, here you go, 33, 34. He's missed some time. Embiid's never going to play a full season. And I know what some people said yesterday. You don't need Embiid to play 70 plus, save him for the playoffs. Okay, fine. But there's an enormous amount of pressure on this franchise to win. And if history has shown us anything, they've come up lame. And if history has shown us anything in the world of sports, when you try to assemble that super teamish, when you try to throw all the money at players and try to make that one last run, it doesn't really pan out. 15 past the 12 o'clock hour, just cranking up on a Tuesday edition of Middays with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones, coming at you inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town. Studios powered by Broad Street South. And of course, our wonderful friends over at ION TV, ION Tampa Bay, for breaking news, weather, and sports. Check them out. Log on right now. Great partnership. We're so happy to be a part of it. We'll take a quick time out. We'll open up at 727-858-6650. 727-858-6650. Got some comments coming in on social, on Facebook, on Twitter. Like, you can tweet at me at RichQ on Q. I want to get into a little more of this NBA, the Batman, the Robin. I certainly want to get into some NFL because I've got some futures I want to discuss with you guys and get your take. And then we will certainly give you guys our MLB plays. I got to start picking it up, man. I mean, quietly, I feel as though we haven't even paid attention to what's going on in baseball. I really feel that way. I feel like it's July and we were so bombarded, especially the Florida audience. You guys, Pete and Angel down there, you guys were bombarded with what's going on with the ECHL team, the Everblades winning the Kelly Cup again, third time, 3 straight times, back to back to back. The Florida Panthers, hoisting the Stanley Cup, not spitting the bit, choking in Game 7. And I feel as though baseball has just, and again, look, the Rays and the Marlins have not had the most excitingest of seasons, but I feel as though baseball has kind of just, we've kind of slid it to the corner. We almost forgot about it, even though your Phillies, Bryce Harper aside, injured, are having a very good first half of the baseball season. There's the patience right there. He's putting up the finger. He wants me to ad lib. He wants me to buy some time. We can get your thoughts on the There he is. There's the incredible shrinking Hermano. What's going on?
Okay. First of all, let me start off with this because this morning you had me sounding like a negative nincompoop to take away the negative Nancy comments. But I hear what you're saying because you're a realist. I said to Pete, am I completely like sold on the Sixers because of the Paul George signing and, you know, and what he did with Kelly Oubre? I'm not sold. And you know more than anybody else. The reason why I'm not sold is because...
You mean with Paul George? You mean Paul George?
Yeah.
Paul George.
No, right. But even with Paul George, you got to figure, Q, I'm not sold because if you look coming off our bench right now, the Sixers bench, just the bench alone, it's not good enough to be able to compete with the likes of the way the Knicks now loaded themselves up with the Villanova Wildcats. And then you look at the Celtics, the current champions. I mean, people are saying they should now be second in line to win the East. I'm not convinced because you mean to tell me now you're going to have Paul George, Tyree, and Joel basically play max minutes leading up and through until we come to the playoffs. And if we've got nobody that we can rely upon on the bench right now, just looking at it on paper in July, there's no way in the world they're going to be able to capitalize to be able to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, yet alone to win the division.
Yeah. See, I think you're being too negative. Good morning, Mick. I think you're being too negative. I think this is a situation where you have to have confidence in the head coach where he's not going to burn these guys out, right? And I know what you're saying about Nick Nurse, Paul George logging a lot of minutes, Embiid logging a lot of minutes. Maxi's a younger player logging a substantial amount of minutes, but that's where coaching comes into play in the NBA. I mean, if we're talking in February, March, and this team is 10 games back of the Celtics and they're looking at the 4-5 seed, then they're going to be in trouble. Right. But if they're right there, I think they match up well with the Knicks. I mean, that series, objectively and being fair, that series could have went either way. Sixers got a couple lucky breaks. They didn't guard Maxey on the one play. The Knicks got a couple lucky breaks to bounce the ball, and DiVincenzo hitting a three. I do like the makeup of the Knicks. They got some players coming back from injury, but the Celtics had that 1-2-3 punch, right? I mean, you and now you add into the mix this kid White. So it's like the matchups. That's what you're looking for, the matchups. How do they match up? Everything, when you make a move like the Sixers made, and we can equate it to maybe going out and getting that big time pass rusher in the NFL, you're clearly saying we're not only trying to compete in our division, in our conference, but we're trying to run it all, run it back all. We're trying to win it all. Pardon me. We're trying to win it all. And I believe that was the move for Paul George. They know that Joel Embiid, face of the franchise, right, at times can be a dominating presence on the floor when engaged and healthy. They know Embiid's window to win a championship is closing. So what do you want to do? You want to maximize that window, right? That little crack. And I know where you're going with this because we're probably thinking the same thing. If not now, when? And there could be no more excuses. If this doesn't pan out, then this franchise was never meant to win a championship with Embiid. But
correct. Yep. And that's exactly where I'm going to go. And that's why it's not trying to sound negative. My thing is that we've seen Joel Embiid not step up during the playoffs. We've also seen him injured during the playoffs. And so it's a great addition. Don't get me wrong. I love the signing. It was great to bring on Paul George. Absolutely fantastic. My big thing would be, because you can't have Paul George and Tyrese Maxey, to be able to carry this team alone. Joel Embiid has to step in there and become the leader at one point or another. But at the same time, too, it's the unknown expectations. And that's what's driving me more nuts than anything else. And I really shouldn't be thinking about it that way because we still have to go through a summer league program, see what we've developed with the Delaware Blue Coats. and I'm not trying to bring the Sixers faithful down whatsoever. The only thing that is driving me just a little bit kooky is just that because it's the unknown that continues with Joel Embiid as he gets older and as he becomes more and more injury prone.
Yeah, so I would counter or combat that by saying it's a fair point. You have to bring up the injury history. It's almost like Carson Wentz. You're looking at Carson Wentz and being that franchise quarterback, an MVP type of caliber quarterback, and then he was the MVP until he tore up his knee on the road against the Rams. And then you have a backup come in. You can't rely on him, and then his career kind of went south. Now, I'm not comparing. That's apples and oranges. Point being is, can you rely on the quarterback? Quarterback's availability. That's what you want. Can you rely on Embiid? And as people pointed out yesterday and commented, and they're still commenting, listen, you don't need him to play 60, 75. You need him fresh for the playoffs. Yes, but there's something to be said about synergy. There's something to be said about everyone on the floor at the same time. And when you got a guy that's hurt early or misses 10, 15 games, I think it was the stat I pulled up, and I'll double check during the break, but Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and James Harden, I don't even think they had a handful of games on the floor at the same time when they were with the Brooklyn Nets. And it was an utter disaster. Now, I'm not suggesting, nor am I hoping, wishing, or trying to manifest an injury. But if George gets hurt in November, or Embiid's banged up, or Nurse is running these guys in the ground, or Maxey tweaks an ankle and misses a couple weeks, sure, we're going to question it. But injuries, they are a part of sports. Every time the quarterback drops back to pass, just ask a Jet fan and Aaron Rodgers, not touched, right? So I hear your concerns. I just think I think being as fair as possible right now, if they don't get to the NBA finals, again, it is a disaster. It's just, you can't keep making these moves year in and year out. And I believe if you're a really diehard and fair, realistic fan, you know to a man that if they don't make the NBA finals, or if they get bounced again in the first and second round over the next couple of years, and Paul George, you give him a max deal, 34, 35, 36, 37, and Embiid's getting older and breaking down, and Max is getting frustrated. It shows you then as a fan, they're not built a certain way, right? They're not maximizing the talent. Jovan checks in. If the Sixers can replicate what they did last season early, blowing out teams sitting and beating the fourth, they should be fine. Listen, it's all about the minutes restriction. I get it. But again, you can also get banged up in the playoffs and you can miss a series. So it's tough, man. Only Embiid knows his body. And he's very awkward, lands awkwardly, gets nicked up, banged up. But if he plays 60, 65, and this team's a 2-3 seed, and they're gelling and they're grooving and they're in rhythm and you got all three engaged, plus if they round out the roster and we talk about a little depth on the bench, they're going to be a hard out. Do I think they compete with the Celtics right now, July 2nd? I can't say that because I haven't seen it yet. I need these guys on the floor. And I go back to that Brooklyn Nets example. It's tough to gauge when you're making all these moves and these guys aren't on the floor. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, and then that's why I agree as far as I think Jovan's, he's getting exactly what I'm saying as well. As he says, maybe playing the Olympics will help him get in shape too. It could be a possibility, but my thing is that that's my issue. The Sixers, we've seen players go win championships elsewhere, and that's also part of every league, every team. That's the whole thing. My thing is that we continue to build around Embiid. And then when we need Embiid, we saw with Harden, right? James Harden came here. We thought, okay, great. Another missing puzzle that we added, put him in, then come the playoffs. Embiid was hurt. First game, James Harden lights out. Embiid comes back. No more James Harden. That's gone. Yeah. Then you have Embiid last year during the playoffs, same exact thing. Lands awkwardly. Now, we're talking about different stuff during the season as well. It's aggravating more than anything else to know that now you sign this key attribute that you definitely need. But it's the stupid unknown that gets to the point like, okay, do we go through another miserable season?
That's life. That's life. You can walk outside and get hit by a Mr. Softy truck. That's the unknown, my friend. I mean,
at least it has
soft serve. Who knows? Soft serve. I don't know. I want to get into something you mentioned on the other side about the players bolting and leaving, because I've got a couple prime examples too. I'm glad you brought it up, of when you do bring on that marquee free agent or make that blockbuster monster trade and how sometimes it pans out. sometimes it doesn't. 26 past 12 o'clock hour on the East Coast, just cranking up midway through a Tuesday edition of Middays with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones, coming at you live inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 1029 FM, the game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town studios. We are powered by Broad Street South, Ion TV. Rich Quinones here, Angel Martinez on the other side of glass. Keep the comments coming in as well, 727-858-6650. Quickie timeout. We'll come back on the other side.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces, just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Download the Sports Radio 102.9 FM, the game app, and tell your friends that Florida has a new leader in digital sports radio.
Oh, hey, there we go. A Tuesday edition of Middays with Rich Quinones here, Angel Martinez behind the glass. Keep the comments coming, 727-858-6650. Yeah, it's always going to get powered by Ion TV, as always. Don't forget to download the app, too. It's always interesting when you want your team to go out and make that big signing. And I think in all of sports, I feel as the NFL leaves themselves open to this conversation year in and year out, because the NFL, you've got big time bust of free agent signings, and then you have the players that, hey man, they can get you over the top. And you mentioned a player like Embiid that we kind of saw this last off season in the summer. We kind of heard the grumblings after they got bounced by the Knicks. You almost plant the seed in the organization's ear that you're not happy, or you kind of, subconsciously plant the seed to the organization where you let them know, hey, this is just, we can't stay status quo. We need to make changes. And again, like anything in life, if you keep doing the same thing over and over, and you keep getting, expecting a different result, that's insanity, right? I mean, you're always going to get the same result if you don't change your habits, if you don't pivot. And the Sixers, and there's many other franchises that have done this, and some of them have found out the hard way that just because you make the trade, just because you make the signing, just because you make the move, it doesn't pan out. Like, I remember when the Phillies made the move for Jim Tomei, right? I mean, it was like, hey man, this guy he's going to put us over the top. I mean, it was an exciting time if you were a Phillies fan. I mean, I watched it play out, and I'm like, okay, man, this is pretty cool, right? I mean, this is awesome. I mean, look what, and he put up monster numbers, right? I mean, think about it. He got banged up a little bit in 2005, but 2002, 2003, he had, 52, 47, right? The same thing with Harper. You're seeing it. Harper right now was a great move by the Philadelphia Phillies because you can argue that he is a perennial NL MVP candidate when healthy, on the field, engaged, put up monster numbers. The odds say right now he's right there in the NL, okay? But they also have to win a World Series.
Correct.
Reggie White goes to Green Bay. He bolts, he leaves because God told him to. He leaves the Eagles and he wins the Super Bowl. That's stuck in a lot of people's craw a little bit, but we've seen it. And sometimes when you have that marquee face of the franchise and they're not happy, management does everything in their power to try to appease them. But at what cost, right? I mean, you can't sell your soul. In certain sports, if you give up all these number ones for a guy, you're trading, you're giving him a monster contract in the NFL. We know how these contracts are. It can blow up in your face. In baseball, you're going to throw money out the guy. I forget. I think it was the outfielder that played for Boston, and then he was signed by the Mets, and he was just horrible. He was absolutely horrible. And I forget the player's right on the tip of my tongue, but he just never panned out. I mean, there have just been some really bad big time trades and free agent signings. And the Sixers are going to, in 2 years, we're going to look back, if you're a Sixers fan, and you're going to say, was Paul George the missing piece? Because again, I can't emphasize this enough for the listening audience. If you don't win a championship, it's a moot point. What'd you make the move for? You're in the business of winning. You're in the business of winning championships. That's why in the NFL, when you see sometimes the Giants' offensive line is getting crushed. So what do? They want to sign that monster tackle in the offseason, or they can't get to the quarterback, and they know they need that $65 million pass rusher, the edge rusher. You go out and sign him. When teams need that shutdown corner, you go out and you sign him. When they want that big-time free agent quarterback, you want to go out and sign him. But we've seen bust. Scott Mitchell with the Lions in 1994. He had a cup of coffee, played well with Miami. It never panned out, right? Ahman Green went to the Texans in 2007. Never panned out. Albert Haynesworth, never panned out. Hugh Douglas took the money and ran to Jacksonville. Didn't pan out. You can go on and on and on. We've seen it so many times. Neil O'Donnell with the Jets in 1996. Gets to the Super Bowl in 1995. Then all of a sudden, he starts 6 games? The Jets go 1-15. So just because you've got this idea in your mind, you've got this idea in your head that this guy's getting me over the top. In the NFL, it always happens to be the quarterback. We want that quarterback. And then when he falls flat on his ass, you set your franchise back. So you look at high risk, high reward. It's a risk to sign George because there was a lot of talk that he didn't want to leave LA. He's injury prone, as we alluded to yesterday, but he's a scorer. He's a wing guy. He can put the ball on the floor. He can create a shot. He can do some great things. So there's the risk, the reward, get us in the NBA Finals. Because I'm telling you right now, man, this team, Angel, if they do not get to the Eastern Conference Final, and you don't get to the NBA Finals, I mean, I might even take it a step further. What's the move for? What's the point of making the move? This move is to compete with who? The Boston Celtics,
right?
Not the New York Knicks. This move is to compete with the Boston Celtics, not the Knicks. That's why you make this move.
Correct. And I think the other thing, which is it's again, from the homer perspective, that I can't believe how many Knicks fans
I would love what Angel's saying right now. I guarantee I'm going to have to refresh.
Oh boy. Go ahead. Refresh.
Where he doesn't have his mic on.
No.
So I'm gonna ad lib right now. He wants me to refresh. Is that what you want me to do? All right, fine. Yeah. You keep talking. I'll refresh, and I'll see you in about 15 to 20. Go ahead. Take it away, Martin.
All righty, there he goes. He'll be back, folks. He just had to refresh his screen just so you can see and hear exactly what I had to say. So Rich will be back here in about less than 10 seconds. Thank you guys, by the way, for listening and watching here on the social medias. Don't forget Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, the app. You can download it right on the homepage, sr1029thegame.com. And there he is, just like the magic elf on the shelf there.
Yeah.
But the thing it's annoying to me. The big one is I was saying was that as far as like the Knicks fans, when they came to the Wells and bought as many tickets as they did to represent their team, rightfully so, because that's what they did. But this would be the ultimate bust. And just in my opinion, what the hell do I know? I would love for Javon to make his comment as well, but it would be a bust because at this point, every year you're chasing the Celtics and you can't catch up. It's like you start out the gate, you might start winning the sprint. But when it comes to the marathon, here come the Celtics and everybody else, and then they pass you and leave you behind. And that's where it's getting to be annoying to be patient as we've had since 1983 to try to go back and finally hoist the Naismith Trophy. Go ahead.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you were to really take a step back and we're seeing every city, we'll say Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Chicago, Washington. We can even say LA for this matter. All those cities, right? Major markets. With respect to their franchises, if you really take a step back, you look at, say, okay, the Bruins in the NHL. New England's going to struggle a little bit. The Red Sox struggling, but the Boston Celtics just won another championship. You look in New York. The Giants and the Jets are a disgrace. They're an absolute disgrace. They're a mess. Maybe the Jets with their defense win some games this year. Okay, fine. But they get perfect example. They put all their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket and it blew up in 4 offensive plays. So it could go down as one of the worst signings in NFL history because of Aaron Rodgers' stature as a Hall of Fame quarterback that's going to rollerblade into Canton. But if they don't win anything, what was the point of the move? You look at the Yankees playing good baseball, but the Yankees are measured by what? What they can do in October. If they don't get to the ALCS, if they don't get to the World Series, it's a disaster. The Mets turning around a little bit. The Lakers have issues. The Dodgers are a very good team, right? I mean, we can keep going through cities. Chicago's got some hope with Caleb Williams. The Bulls are a young team, somewhat on the rise. We know the White Sox stink. The Cubs are okay. They're right around 500 here and there, teetering or a couple games back or below. I'm not, 100%. Point being is, look what's going on in Philly right now. The Flyer fan is a faithful fan.
Yeah.
Because the old school Flyers fan, because my cousins are old school Flyers fans. To this day, they still believe that Bobby Nystrom was offsides. So they go back to the 70s and the Broad Street Bullies. They're fanatical. The hockey fan is always fanatical. But there seems to be a glimmer of hope with the Flyers. The Sixers just make the move for George, right? Title or bust. The Philadelphia Eagles get back to the Super Bowl, Super Bowl or bust. And then the Philadelphia Phillies. So you had the Eagles in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. You had the Philadelphia Phillies in the World Series. You have the Sixers making the playoffs and the Flyers, ascending, right? Because they're a young team. They're rebuilding. Point being is, if you look around the major sports market, give me another city that's set up right now, which pains me. Makes me want to throw up in my mouth, to be honest. But it pains me to say this. What other city is set up right now when you're talking about the 4 major sports teams better than Philadelphia? But with that, there are a substantial amount of expectations.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Right. And that's again leading to, it's the same way right now. Again, this would be a double splash if it does happen, but Brandon Ayuk and the 49ers right now are not in the best of worlds. And he's also expressed a super amount of interest to become a Philadelphia Eagle, which would explode the entire city. And starting here from Tampa, making his ripples all the way back to Philadelphia. But, it's just, I guess every year we get to see it. It's always there, right? We're looking over the fence. We're like Wilson, back from Home Improvement days. We're looking over the fence. We see the finish line. It's right there, and it's always a step back. Now, take the Phillies 2 years ago. Phillies weren't supposed to be in the World Series, but somehow or another they got there. Fast forward last year, I played a video from, if you guys remember, from the guy that was outside Citizen Bank Ballpark, and then he talked about the Phillies, and people talked about they had 2 home games, they blew it, blah, blah, blah. And it's, again, last year you could have made the conversation. They weren't supposed to be there as far as the NLCS. They blew it. Obviously, they didn't make it to the World Series. But this year now they're the number 1 team in Major League Baseball. Again, barring any major injuries to get us to where we need to be. it's just, I guess, as being a Philly faithful, it drives you nuts sometimes to know that all these key pieces are always added to our teams. And then we see the guys drift off into the sunset with another team somewhere. And then the year that follows or 2 years later, here they are winning, an NBA championship, a Super Bowl. And Reggie White, for example, thank God we got one in 2017.
You can't blame the player.
No, you can't. That's what I mean. You can't. But it's the management. It's, for example, you got Harris, who now is going to, hang on for a second.
Yeah.
You got Harris, who now is probably, and I know he's trying to do his due diligence by making sure he takes care of the Sixers. I know they're still trying to build their own venue out there in Chinatown. I don't know if that's ever going to come about or not, but that's still in the process. And then he's got to worry about the Redskins right now, the Commanders, that he's trying to build up there. So it's every year, Laurie with Howie Roseman, how he tries to work his magic and all that stuff comes into play. And it's a constant shortage. I guess I'm getting to the point as a Philly fan base faithful is that we every year it gets closer, but every year it gets further back.
So let me give you a couple questions, right?
Sure.
Or let me give you a couple examples. Jimmy Rollins won a World Series.
Correct?
So, did we look at Jimmy Rollins and eventually say that, Jimmy Rollins was not happy with the Philadelphia Phillies, even though he wound up going to the Dodgers and then he bounced around. I think he was with the White Sox. Allen Iverson, they got to an NBA championship. They got to a finals. Ryan Howe, he won. Eric Lindros, right? They never got over that hump. McNabb never got over that hump. Sometimes the handwriting's on the wall where you need to change the scenery or a guy's going to get traded. I mean, I could not for the life of me stand when the Eagles drafted Carson Wentz. All the talk was Carson Wentz. Look at every throw this guy makes. He's the best quarterback in the NFL. Here we go. He's the next Peyton Manning. He's the next Tom Brady. I mean, how'd that work out? Look at that quarterback draft class right now. And the best quarterback just signed another monster deal with Detroit, which is a team on the rise led by Jared Goff. So I know what you're saying, but I think you also have to, as I alluded to, kind of take a step back and read the room a little bit. If you have 4 major sports teams in a market like Philadelphia and they're all on the rise, cannot say the same thing in Boston, cannot say the same thing in New York, cannot say the same thing in Washington, cannot say the same thing in Chicago, cannot say the same thing in Los Angeles. It's just when you get to this point, you want to get past the finish line. And I think that's, there lies the rub, the frustration. I mean, man, all the years, the New England Patriots played in a horrible division, but I can't take anything away from the New England Patriots because they beat up on Buffalo, the Jets, Miami. But how envious of a sports fan are we when you knew the Patriots year in and year out, led by the hoodie and number 12, were going to win 11, 12, 13 games. They were winning the division. They were getting the playoffs. They were making deep runs. They were getting to the Super Bowl. I can't say that. Listen, the Giants won in 86. They won in 90. They had a run with a backup in Haas. They had a couple good years, sandwiched in between, prior, after, and then they had down years, and then they had 2 runs with Eli. Other than that, the Giants have been a horribly run franchise over the last 15 years. Their roster building from Gettleman to the contracts that they gave out. The Yankees year in and year out, I don't care about what the Yankees are doing in April, May, June, July. Honestly, right. I don't. And then I'm watching the Stanley Cup and I'm saying to myself, if the Rangers beat the Florida Panthers, they probably had a legit shot to beat Edmonton. Now, I didn't know the Panthers were going to race out to a 3-0 lead and then, make everyone sweat and tighten up and go 7. But I can't say that as a New York fan. It's just we're built kind of like all these other markets, Philly, Boston, Chicago, DC. You always want your team set up for success and you always want your team to win. And in the NFL, when I know the Giants are going to be out of it by October, it's frustrating. It's painful to watch. The Knicks have given me a glimmer, a run. The Rangers gave me a run. I can tell you right now, my buddy texted me the other day. He's like, Yankees, man. I mean, Judge putting up monster numbers and look historic numbers and look what the Yankees are doing. And hey, you get Cole back and all of a sudden it's like a midseason acquisition. Hey, that's great. They're 54-32. right? But they've also lost 7 out of 10, I believe. I don't care what the Yankees are doing right now. If the Yankees get bounced in the ALDS or the AL Championship Series, it's another lost season. And I was spoiled because I had those runs in the 90s and in the 2000s, right? So you take these runs when you get them. I mean, think about all the years the Phillies were really good, but they had disappointments, right? Colorado Rockies, St. Louis, Ryan Howard, the bat on his shoulders. They had disappointing losses. They finally get over the hump. Same thing with the Eagles. NFC Championship, right? No urgency against the Rams. None whatsoever. Ricky Manning Jr., 3 interceptions. They stopped running the ball in Carolina. McNabb's banged up, right? Tampa Bay, Blaine Bishop cutting off the wrong angle and Joe Jurevicius and Barber going the other way. Then finally over the hump. And I think that's where this move now with the Philadelphia 76ers, they believe finally over the hump. Philadelphia Phillies a couple years ago, this move, Bryce Harper, we need to get over the hump. That's just sports, man. As fans, we have zero patience whatsoever. Imagine being a Giants fan and I got to sit through that garbage come October where they're 1-4. Daniel Jones is banged up. Drew Givy, a little piece of hair lock is out under center, and they're getting waxed 35-6 every. It's horrible to watch, man. It's horrible. I mean, the fact that they actually beat the Philadelphia Eagles and they haven't beaten the Eagles, Link has been a house of horrors for the past 20 years. That doesn't even give me a glimpse of hope. I got nothing, brother. I got the Knicks. I got the Rangers. If the Yankees falter and the Giants go south, that's it. Wake me next April.
I know. It's just, again, I bring, because I don't want people to think it, we can always see things through whatever they call it, rose-colored glasses. And I have no problem with that because we are definitely, Philadelphia is on the move in the right direction. Definitely for the 4 majors, especially what Briere and Jonesy's doing for the Flyers, definitely getting to the point where at least it's been, listen, there was a lot of us that I know an ostrich will never bury its head in the sand. But if you use that for an example, that's the way we felt with the Flyers because it just seemed like every year there was nothing there. Then they bring on Gritty and it drove me bananas and you spent the money on a freaking mascot and didn't want to bother to acquire players. Let's get this goofy mascot with the eyes, buck all over the place and yay, look, we got Gritty. So there's just certain things that just drive me bananas. But I do like that they are moving up the same way. The same could be said about the Eagles this season. We shall see what the product is going to be out there in the field. And a lot of it's going to be the focus primarily on Nick Sirianni, what he's going to end up doing this season. So we're 7.5 weeks away from training camp and we'll see what happens there. We know it's, I can't base it upon the first 3 games. We got the preseason games.
Yeah.
Now the regular season games, but it's the same way. I just hope that the Sixers, as they continue to build up this roster and get a little bit better, if they could add another little, element to come off the bench, I would feel a little more secure because yes, like Javon said earlier, it's about the time management. Like you've been saying the same exact way. I just want to make sure that Nick Nurse into year 2, like he did with the Toronto Raptors, he can acquire that same kind of atmosphere with the Sixers saying, all right, and B, he'll get whatever, I'm just throwing it out there hypothetically, 28 minutes per game, whatever. Something where he's just not being worn down. And here we are come January, and we already start talking Sixers, 15 games behind. What are they going to do now? And then come February, Joel Embiid just broke his ankle. It's just, it gets to the point of just annoyance. But I do like the signing. I'm hoping that this season will be extremely successful for the Sixers. It's the unknown, and that's just what drives me a little bit bananas. That's all.
About 10 plus to play with Power Hour edition of Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here alongside Debbie Downer, Angel Martinez, 727-858-6650. By the way, quick timeout, but before we take it, Bronny James plans to sign a multi-year guaranteed rookie contract with the Lakers. Sources tell The Athletic. Number 55 pick in the 2024 NBA draft, starts his NBA career on the Lakers roster. And let's just be honest, that's exactly what Rich Paul wanted. And that's exactly what Rich Paul forced the Lakers' hand to do. So enjoy breaking news when Bronny James goes 2 for 9 in his first time out on the floor. But I hope the kid does well. The coverage itself just leads a lot to be desired. But anyway, all right, got to start wrapping up. We'll come back. We'll close it out. Power Hour. I want to get to a little NFL. And again, if you guys want to chime in, 727-858-6650. Keep it locked in. Tuesday edition, Middays with Q. Coming at you inside the friendly confines of the Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town studios. We are powered by Broad Street South as well as Eye on TV.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Call or text the show at 727-858-6650. Now, back to Q.
Uh-oh. Did we go dark?
No. Oh, you can't see
it
again?
Tell me to refresh again?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead.
Uh-oh. Oh, he's got to tell me to refresh. Oh, my goodness. Hold on, peeps.
Outright.
Do not.
Listen, it happened twice with Pete this morning. No surprise. It'll probably happen this afternoon. That's why if you guys don't see me on at Martinez Company, there's so much stuff that I can work on, and there's only so many hours during the day. So that's why I have not been on during my normal work hour shows, because as I've been trying to tweak stuff.
Hey, I'm Rich Quinones. Thanks for joining me today.
All you need is Mr. Rogers on that mug, and you'll be all right, because that's what it feels like at the moment.
Yeah. Refreshing is just, but hey, we have to fight through it. I mentioned this. I want a little push. Check out the latest edition of BYP. It's on my YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. Lloyd Vance and I, we were going through, so we break down all the divisions in the NFL, and we were mentioning the NFC North. And I'll kind of save the conversation a little more for next week when we're all back in the saddle, full week of shows and whatnot. I would say right now, the most compelling division in football. He thinks he likes the NFC North. Now, I don't, the NFC East, I think, is too easy to say. I think the NFC South is boring. I think the NFC West is top heavy with San Fran. For me, I still believe at this moment, I think the most compelling division in football is the AFC East, because you have three teams that believe they all have a legitimate shot at getting to the Super Bowl and winning it. Buffalo, Miami, and the Jets. And then you got a New England squad that's 4-13. They haven't tasted that type of season in many, 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 many years. And they're probably going to have to eat it again this season. So you have three top-heavy teams, and then you got the Pats. But I think the AFC East, for my money, I think the storylines with all these 32 teams out there, I think the AFC East, with the Dolphins in your guys' backyard, not so much the Bucs or the Jags, but Miami, Buffalo, and the Jets, it makes it really compelling because everyone wants to see the window closing for Buffalo. Is Tua the guy in Miami? Is he holding out? Is he going to get paid? And what are we going to get from Aaron Rodgers if you're a Jet fan, right? We kind of started talking, right? We started talking the show about making that big-time free agent acquisition or that trade or signing that player, that franchise player that you think is going to get you over the hump. And if it doesn't pan out, you have a lot of egg on your face. If I'm the Jets, man, you can ill afford. Angel, I put up the Jets schedule, and I threw this out there again on BYP. They open on the road against the 49ers, then they have the Titans, and they have the Patriots. Okay, then they got Denver. They've got the Vikings, the Bills, the Steelers. They've got winnable games, man. But if they come out of the gate and they're 4-4, 3-5, 3-2, we're going to start talking about Aaron Rodgers, the age, coming off the injury. Robert Salah, does he have these guys playing? What's going on in the defense? For that reason alone, I think they're must-watch TV, but I just think that division as a whole is the most compelling going into the 2024 season.
I mean, it's not bad. I can not disagree there. I think it's pretty good. I don't put the Jets in Super Bowl talk because I think after week 1, Aaron Rodgers out there in San Fran, he's going to take quite the licking out there, I believe. But to me, Miami and the Bills, yeah, I think they were the more probable contenders for the Super Bowl. But again, if Tua does not have a Tua-type successful year, or he has more than his expectations and they don't make it, are we then done with Tua talk? And then now do we have to look at the young head coach and say, okay, might be time for a coaching change out there in Miami? Or
he's too young of a coach. He's a good head coach. You're not getting rid of the head coach. And I still believe Tua. I mean, listen, you guys got the pulse of the Dolphins more than I do, but you got a quarterback that threw 30 touchdowns and threw for over 4,500 yards.
Right.
And he did play 17 games. You want that from your quarterback. If you look at his numbers since he's come in the NFL, his numbers have just gotten progressively better. I like Tua, and I think the offensive line has done a nice enough job. I mean, he was only sacked 29 times. You like to see that right around 20 or so, but I think the kid can play. I think they have enough offensive weapons. As I mentioned, it's just that last game of the season, Sunday night against Buffalo, where Josh Allen went crazy, and that allowed the Bills to avoid Kansas City, and Miami had to go on the road in those elements. They didn't stand a chance in hell, right? And they also lost a running back. Mostert was banged up as well. So they had some issues. I think there's a lot of pressure on Miami. I think there's pressure on Buffalo because now all of a sudden, no Diggs in Buffalo. It's Allen. Here we go. That head coach is under the microscope, the hot seat. And with the Jets, listen, we talk about the 2, 3, 4 head coaches. We kind of know. My gut actually feels there's 3 head coaches on the hot seat in the NFC East. They're all in the same division. McCarthy, Brian Dable, and Nick Sirianni. But then you can sit and also say that Robert Saleh, because we know the only reason they got Rodgers was because of Hackett and they were looking to go in a different direction. After 4 offensive snaps, your season goes in the toilet. And Robert Saleh should have lost his job 2 years ago, but they've been very patient with him. So he's under the microscope. That's a head coach that's on the hot seat. McDermott in Buffalo, he's on the hot seat. You're not going to see that with New England, and you're not going to see that with Miami because that coach in Miami, that team has been a bad team for a long time, and now all of a sudden they're starting to play some winning football. I think you have to be patient with the Dolphins. I think people will look at the Dolphins and say, hey, that's great. You can put up 35, 40 points. You got to stop somebody, and you have to be able to run the football when you can't throw it and vice versa. So I just think it's an intriguing, compelling division. I pulled up the Super Bowl odds. Remember now, these constantly, if you're looking for futures, they constantly fluctuate. I mean, Kansas City has an implied 14.3% chance to win the Super Bowl. The 49ers are sitting at 650. Those two teams played last year in the Super Bowl, which is right around 13.3%. Then you got the other usual suspects: Baltimore, Detroit, Buffalo, Cincinnati, didn't even mention them, Philly. And this shows you that people get giddy after one great successful season by 2 teams. Houston Texans, okay, their opening odds were plus 2,500 along with Green Bay. Now it sits plus 1,400, plus 1,600 respectively for Houston and Green Bay. So that's telling you there's money on those teams where people think they're going to run roughshod through their conferences and get to the Super Bowl and ultimately win it. And that's what happens when you have that one great season. People are wanting to see what are you going to do for an encore. So just kind of, a little food for thought on this Tuesday when we start to look at some of these divisions. I'm excited, man. I cannot wait. I know it's July, but we have training camp and then we have preseason, but I'm excited for football. I think the Giants are going to stink, but be that as it may, I think we're going to have a lot of good content to talk about, give some good betting insight as well when we start to talk about these futures and the odds. And those teams that I mentioned, man, they're going to be must watch. I mean, imagine if the Eagles get off to a 2-5 start and Jalen Hurts is struggling and Nick Sirianni is doing the antics. Whew. Whew. Be lighting up the microphone then, right?
Yeah. See, I just started feeling better. Then you started. Now you come back with that. No, but it's true. It's true. I mean, if they start out 2-5, yeah. Then I mean, I think every medium in America would be a nonstop talk about Nick Sirianni, and especially even if it's game one. No offense, game one comes around. I do not want to see the super hijinks of Nick Sirianni. I don't. Stay head coach material. Focus upon what's out there in the field. Let me know how things are in the post-game conference, not with watering the grass, throwing a seat up in the air, and hopefully the palm tree lands somewhere else. No, just stick to the facts. Let me know how Jalen Hurts is doing. Let me know how our special teams is doing. Let's keep it simple. Keep it moving.
There you have it. Last word to Angel Martinez on the Eagles. Don't forget, you get the shows on demand on Rich Q on Q, Broad Street South YouTube channel. Good stuff with the comments. Respond to those guys that were tweeting on Facebook as well. Always appreciate it. Remember, start your week off and your day off. Pete Sheppard, 7 to 10, Monday to Friday. Martinez and Company, 10 to 12. Myself, 12 to 2. A little power hour with the short week. Everyone have a good 4th of July, and always be safe.
Yeah.
On X at Rich Q on Q. BYP is up. The new pod, You Never Freaking Played, is up as well with my interview with Reese Wood. So with that being said, always appreciate Angel keeping us on the air, producing today's show. Angel Martinez. We are all powered by Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game, Southwest Florida's newest game in town, Broad Street South, and Eye on TV. Appreciate everyone keeping us locked into a Tuesday edition of Middays with Q. As always, I'm Rich Quinones. Have a good Sports Tuesday. Enjoy your week. Be safe. Be sound. Hasta luego. Buen día.